This is one of my old series, and therefore a re-upload. The writing could be shitty, and also the video was not really well edited at that time, but I had no motivation to redo everything again. Hope you still like it. Boom. A shot caught Atsumu in the side of his stomach and another in his shoulder. He fell to the ground and hit his head, which caused him to pass out immediately. Sakusa turned around and looked in disbelief at the scene that had just taken place in front of him. His face turned pale, his eyes opened wide in shock, and his lips began to quiver. 𝒖𝒔𝒆𝒅. He crawled to Atsumu and pulled his lifeless body into his arms, hugged him tightly, tears falling onto Atsumu's face. Sakusa felt the warm blood leave Atsumu's body and flow over his hands. I'm sorry Omi. I'm sorry that I also have to leave you. 9 months ago. Tell me Atsumu, how was it? Atsumu entered the cafe of his twin brother Osamu and sat down at the counter, resting his head on the side of it. He sighed. Actually, the same as the others. Nothing that really interests me. I don't think I'll get the job anyway. And if you did get it, will you take it then? Actually I'd rather help you and sooner out. Well, you are always welcome here, you know that, but in the long run this won't make you happy either. Atsumu straightened up and looked at Osamu. Only one thing made me happy. I guess now I'll just have to choose the least evil. Wow, and that's me? No, the least evil is Suna. You know you're talking to your boss. I wish my boss would be nicer to his employees. Isn't he? Suna, no one asked you. The three of them goofed around with each other and chatted for a while. Atsumu had just come from a job interview, but he didn't really want the job at all. Atsumu was a professional track and field athlete until 2 years ago. He was very good at many things, but his main discipline was hurdling. He was unbeatable and a real natural. However, 2 years ago Atsumu had a bad training accident in which he tore his ACL and meniscus. He was out for a whole year, and even after that he was far from being back in shape. He trained hard, but his body played against him. He trained for almost another year and got really good again, but it wouldn't be enough for a professional career. That's why he had to stop and do something else. Atsumu was currently helping out at his brother's cafe, but wanted to look for something new, because Osamu didn't really need another employee at the moment and he only hired him because he didn't want to leave Atsumu without a job. Head up Atsumu, you'll find something that you'll enjoy. Atsumu sighed. Whatever. Atsumu stayed at the cafe for a while, eating a piece of strawberry cake and drinking a cafe latte. While Osamu was a talented baker, Suna really knew how to make the best coffee in town. The two harmonized perfectly, and it was truly a happy coincidence that the two were able to open their cafe together. Atsumu put his head in his hands and watched Osamu and Suna. While Suna was about to make a coffee, Osamu sneaked up from his back and put his arms around Suna's waist to hug him from behind. Samu kissed Suna's neck and whispered something in his ear that made Suna giggle and Osamu smile. Atsumu smiled at that sight and sighed. Oh, what I would give to be in love like that again too. Atsumu took the last sip of his coffee and pushed the glass and plate aside. I'll be out for a while. Will you be back for dinner? Yep. Fatty tuna? Again. Pretty please. Osamu looked Suna in the eyes, but Suna just shrugged. That's fine with me. Atsumu beamed and Samu nodded. Okay, fatty tuna. Yay. See you later. Atsumu left the cafe and walked around the city for a while. He liked watching how many people were always out and seeing how much was going on in the city. Somehow it gave him a warm feeling. Atsumu continued walking for a while when he suddenly turned into a lost alley. There he spotted two men trying to squeeze a woman into their car. Get the hell off me. Help. The woman tried to fight back, but she couldn't stand up to the two men. Atsumu's heart was racing. They kidnapped the poor woman in the middle of the day. I have to help her quickly. Atsumu was about to run over to them and drive them away when he saw a gun in the belt buckle of one of the men. Atsumu gulped. Shit. He snuck up on them until he was close enough to ambush them. He gave one man a punch in the face that knocked him out instantly, and the woman was able to kick the other man, who was holding her tight, in his soft parts. Atsumu grabbed her hand and looked at her in panic. We need to get out of here now. Hold on tight. Atsumu ran and pulled the woman behind himself. They were running for both their lives. Atsumu was about to turn the corner when he spotted more of those dubious men. He stopped abruptly, which caused the woman to crash into him. Atsumu turned to the woman and looked her in the eyes, both breathing heavily. "There are more of them." The woman looked around in panic until she suddenly grabbed Atsumu's hand and ran. "Come on, this way." They ran into a dark alley and were noticed by the men who were now running after them again. Shit. They ran towards a high wall that blocked their way. Dead end. "Come on, I'll help you across." The woman looked at Atsumu perplexed. "Don't worry, I'll get across by myself. Hurry, we don't have much time." The woman understood immediately and nodded. Atsumu folded his hands together and helped the woman up. She pulled herself up and jumped down on the other side. Shit. Atsumu jumped to the wall and pulled himself up by it. He immediately jumped down and straightened up to help the woman. No. That was the last thing Atsumu heard before he was hit on the head with something hard and immediately fainted. Atsumu slowly woke up, blinking a few times to regain consciousness. He felt a silky soft surface and noticed that he was covered with a blanket. Atsumu tried to sit up and immediately groaned in pain. "Fuck, you are awake." The young woman rushed to Atsumu's bedside and helped him sit up. Atsumu grabbed the back of his head and noticed a bandage. He looked at the woman, completely confused. "Slow down. You got hit on the back of your head and now you probably have a mild concussion. Are you feeling sick?" She looked at him with concern. Atsumu didn't understand a bit of what was going on. He just shook his head. "No, everything is fine so far. How are you? Are you okay? Where are we?" Atsumu looked around and found himself in a very large and neat room. The woman grabbed Atsumu's hand and tried to calm him down as she noticed that Atsumu was getting a little panicky. "Don't worry, we are safe. This is my home." She gave Atsumu a warm smile. "I'm Eiko Suzuki." It worked. Eiko managed to calm Atsumu down. He gave her a small smile back. "Atsumu Miya, but call me Atsumu." Eiko beamed, which made the corners of Atsumu's mouth twitch up as well. "Thank you, Atsumu. You really saved my life today. No need to thank me. Are you okay? What did those men want from you?" "I'm fine. No need to worry." Eiko continued to smile at Atsumu and avoided the second question. Atsumu looked at her a bit worried. She obviously didn't want to talk about it. "Do you live here alone? This room is huge." "How do I know? There are a few more rooms here that are as big as this one. If you want, I'll show you around later." "Oh wow, yes. I would love to see those." Eiko giggled. "To answer your question, no, I don't live here alone. My two best friends live here too. I also live together with my two best friends." "Oh really?" "Yes. Samu, my twin brother, and Suna, his boyfriend. It's just cheaper for us that way." "Yeah, haha, cheaper." Eiko smiled sheepishly and rubbed the back of her head. The two chatted for a while longer and really got along well. Eiko and Atsumu were pretty much alike. They were both totally excited and loved talking to each other, without the two of them noticing. A few hours passed. Suddenly, the door to Eiko's bedroom slowly opened, and then I said Mori. "Kyo." Eiko rushed to the two men who were now already standing in her bedroom. While one of them was beaming all over his face, the other one was grimacing annoyed. Atsumu held his head as Eiko's yelling gave him a headache. Sorry. Atsumu waved his hand and chuckled. "It's alright." Eiko fell into the arms of the two men and hugged them tightly. Her eyes filled a little with tears, but she breathed deeply so that they dissolved again. One of the men patted her head and the other, who had been annoyed with her earlier, now looked at her with a sympathetic look. Atsumu didn't know what was going on, but he understood that there was something that worried Eiko, and that these men must have taken care of it. Eiko turned back to Atsumu. "Atsumu, these are my two best friends, Motoya Komori and Kiyoomi Sakusa." Sakusa winced briefly and then gave Eiko another annoyed look, but she didn't care at all. "So you must be the one who saved our Eiko, right?" Komori smiled and walked towards Atsumu. Atsumu nodded. "Thank you. We really owe you one." "It's no problem." Eiko rushed to Komori and hugged him from behind. Komori smiled at Eiko and put his arm around her shoulder. "Atsumu is super nice. He lives here in town too. His brother owns a cafe downtown. We really need to go there, Mori." Komori smiled and ruffled her hair, which made Eiko pout. She pushed away from him and freed herself from his clinging grip. Then she hurried to Sakusa. Sakusa was leaning in the doorway, his hands in his pockets. He watched the scene from behind with enough distance to the others. Eiko grabbed his arm and pulled him toward Atsumu and Komori, making Sakusa groan in annoyance. Eiko, you are a pain in the ass, let go of me. TSK. At least apologize to Atsumu. Atsumu looked at Eiko and Sakusa in confusion. Eiko sighed. Sakusa knocked you out when you came jumping over the wall. He thought you were one of the men who had been chasing me. Atsumu's eyes widened. Now he looked at Sakusa and lost himself completely. Atsumu eyed the mysterious man in front of him. He was so beautiful. His striking face, the two moles on the right side of his forehead, his wavy hair, everything was so perfect. Atsumu could no longer take his eyes off him. Sorry for hurting you. And no problem. Eiko giggled, bringing Atsumu back to reality as she leaned over Atsumu, breaking eye contact with Sakusa. Atsumu looked at her in shock and caught off guard. So Atsumu, are you ready for a house tour? Atsumu smiled at her and nodded. If you don't need me here anymore, I'll be downstairs. Atsumu trembled as he heard Sakusa's voice. It was deep and calm and just felt so familiar. Atsumu turned to Sakusa and watched him leave the room. He lost himself fully in Sakusa's appearance again. Oh my, is he pissed again? Don't blame him, he probably thinks it's his fault again. I'll talk to him in a minute. Eiko nodded worriedly to Komori and then took Atsumu's hand. Come on Sumu, let's go. Atsumu spent more time with Komori and Eiko until it was already 9 PM. Shit, Samu is waiting for me for dinner. I totally forgot the time. Oh, we'll drive you home. Right Mori? Komori smiled and nodded. Sure, that's the least we can do. Thanks. Samu will kill me. The three of them hurried to the car and Komori drove Atsumu home. They talked about everything the entire ride and just had fun. Atsumu really enjoyed their presence. Even though he had only known them for a few hours, it felt like they had been good friends for years already. Okay, here we are. Atsumu, wait. Give me your phone number. Yeah sure, wait. Atsumu stored his contact information in Eiko's phone and then got out of the car. See you guys. He slammed the door and went home. As he entered, the smell of Osamu's cooked food filled the air. Oh Atsumu, you are late, holy shit, what happened to ya? Osamu rushed to Atsumu and examined his head. Atsumu just realized that he was still wearing a bandage. Are you okay? What happened? Who did this to you? Suna peeked out from the kitchen and looked at the twins in confusion. Then his eyes widened. Atsumu. Atsumu tried to calm them both down again. It is nothing serious. Please let us sit down first. I'm starving. Atsumu made his way past Osamu to Suna to the kitchen. Osamu followed him immediately and never took his worried eyes off his twin brother. As Atsumu sat in the kitchen eating his favorite food, he told Suna and Osamu what had happened today. He told them about the men who almost kidnapped Eiko and about Sakusa who accidentally hit him. As he mentioned Sakusa's name, Atsumu caught a strange feeling filling his stomach. Did you call the police? Eiko said she would testify tomorrow. And all this in the middle of the day. Atsumu, you're lucky nothing worse happened to you. Yeah, I guess so. Atsumu rubbed the back of his head and gave them both a weak smile. He was only now slowly realizing what a dangerous situation he was getting himself into. He unconsciously frowned as he remembered Komori saying that Sakusa blamed himself for the whole thing. He frowned even more when he realized that all three of them were not shocked at all by what had happened today. This wasn't normal, right? Or was it? Atsumu winced and looked Osamu in the eyes in panic. He had been completely lost in his thoughts. Are you okay? Why yes. Just a little tired I guess. Atsumu gave Osamu a fake smile, but he just continued to look at his brother worriedly. I'm going to bed. I'm kind of exhausted. Okay, sleep well. Make sure you get back in shape quickly. Atsumu nodded and made his way to his bedroom, still thinking about Komori, Eiko and Sakusa. Sakusa. Atsumu couldn't get that face out of his mind, his stomach filled with that strange feeling again. What's wrong with me? A few weeks passed, and Atsumu had almost daily contact with Eiko. The two wrote a lot to each other, sometimes they even made video calls, then Komori was usually present. Sakusa was either often to be seen apathetically in the background reading a book, or he wasn't there at all. Atsumu's friendship with the three of them was growing. It was a mild afternoon in March as Atsumu sat on a park bench, listening to music and just enjoying nature. He leaned back and closed his eyes, his attention now fully devoted to the music. He totally flinched, however, when suddenly a person dropped into his lap. Atsumu looked into two big sparkling brown eyes, the smile drawn all over her face. Eiko? Eiko took one of the headphones out of Atsumu's ear and put it in her own, listening along with him. Good taste in music, Sumu. Atsumu grinned at Eiko, but his smile disappeared as he noticed Sakusa was walking towards them. Atsumu became totally nervous. His heart was pounding like crazy and his gaze was held by Sakusa's dark eyes. He was dressed all in black and wore a mask. He was so beautiful. Eiko giggled. Atsumu, are you still looking for a job? Huh? A job? You once said you don't want to sit on your brother's pocket forever. Why yeah. Why? Atsumu looked at Eiko in confusion, but she just smiled. She turned her head to Sakusa, but he just gave her a cold look back. Then she turned her face back to Atsumu, her expression now a bit more serious. Atsumu, I can trust you, right? Huh? Yes? Sure. Could you imagine working for me? For you? Eiko giggled. Yep, for me. Together with Komori and Sakusa. Atsumu's gaze wandered to Sakusa, looking at him questioningly. But Sakusa only frowned. Atsumu noticed that he was not quite comfortable with this. However, the whole thing is not quite harmless and might be a little illegal.